US peanut butter sales in Canada have dropped by 34%. Harley-Davidson has lost nearly half of its customers, and Amazon and Netflix have seen hundreds of thousands of accounts disappear. This appears to be the result of a major decision. Canada has officially banned the import of 6 key products from the United States. What's going on? Could this be a sign of an economic shift unfolding right before our eyes? Why are North American consumers turning their backs on goods and services from the land of stars and stripes? Let's dive deep into this story to better understand the silent forces that are reshaping our lives. A quick note before we begin. This video is intended as a social analysis based on public sources and various academic perspectives. We do not draw conclusions, nor do we support or oppose any particular organization, policy, or individual. Our goal is to spark reflection so that viewers can form their own informed opinions. For decades, a jar of peanut butter might have been the first thing a Canadian or American child pulled out of their lunchbox. Our simple, familiar food tied to memories of family, school, and hard-working days. But recently, that bond seems to be shifting, and not because of taste. In the past few months, the peanut butter market in Canada has seen what could only be described as a remarkable change. A large number of consumers appear to be turning away from long-established American brands like Gif and Skippy names once found in nearly every North American kitchen. According to several market reports, sales of major US peanut butter brands, such as Gif and Skippy in Canada, have plunged by as much as 34% in a single quarter. A figure that cannot be ignored when placed against the backdrop of decades of market stability. Brands that once filled pantry shelves from Ontario to British Columbia are now disappearing from major grocery stores, like Loblaws, Soys, and Metro. In their place, local Canadian brands like Kraft Canada, Nuts to You, and All Good Natural, once only seen in small shops or farmers markets, are now taking center stage on a national level. So, what's really happening? The answer doesn't lie in price nor in product quality. In fact, these local brands are not necessarily cheaper, nor do they run splashy advertising campaigns. Yet, they've been experiencing steady growth during this same period. This isn't just a simple competition between domestic and imported goods. Gif and Skippy didn't fail because of higher prices or declining quality. The consumer backlash seems to stem from something far more complex. Trust. Trust is often seen as a form of social capital, an invisible but powerful force that shapes consumer behavior and even international relations. When people feel hurt or disillusioned by a policy or action from a powerful system, their response may go beyond words and manifest in real choices, in this case, their purchasing decisions. This seemingly minor shift in consumer behavior now appears to be creating ripple effects south of the border. It's likely to trigger a chain of negative consequences for US workers and businesses, particularly in states like Georgia, Arkansas, and Ohio. In Georgia, once a bustling agricultural hub with sprawling peanut fields, many farmers are facing prolonged stockpiles. As demand for big brands falls, processing and procurement have noticeably dropped. Some farmers report that they haven't changed their cultivation methods yet. Sale prices continue to fall. Or in Kansas, some manufacturing plants that had operated steadily for decades are now cutting shifts or pivoting to other product lines, ones that aren't nearly as profitable. These changes could impact not just workers, but also satellite service providers, from transportation to packaging to logistics. Meanwhile, in Ohio, there are also clear signs of slowdown. Some distribution centers report that orders from legacy brands are down by more than 30%, leading to a contraction of their operational systems. These consequences show that states dependent on the peanut butter industry are no longer bystanders in the tariff war. In a globalized economy, no product is too small to escape the consequences, not even a humble 500D jar of peanut butter. For a long time, the image of a middle-aged man riding a Harley-Davidson down the Trans-Canada Highway has symbolized freedom, ruggedness, and North American pride. Harley isn't just a motorcycle brand. It has long been a declaration of personality, a belief in a lifestyle unbound by conventions. But perhaps those glory days are fading, at least in the Canadian market. After Canada imposed a 25% tariff on motorcycles imported from the US, widely seen as retaliation against the current US administration's trade policies, Harley-Davidson sales in Canada reportedly dropped by 46% in just the first 6 months of the year, a figure that made many in the industry sigh in disbelief. For instance, a street bob model once started at around $15,000 Canadian dollars. But after adding import tariffs, shipping costs, and other taxes, the final price could shoot up to over $18,000 Canadian, a price not everyone is willing to pay. That may be why nearly half of Harley-Davidson's Canadian sales vanished, 46%, which means if a dealership used to sell 100 bikes in 6 months, now they're only selling 54 for smaller dealers. This could be the difference between survival and shutting down. According to multiple sources, Harley dealerships across Canada are reporting mass order cancellations, stockpiles of unsold bikes, and even the closure of one of the oldest dealerships in Toronto, a place once considered a biker sanctuary after 22 years in business. It seems motorcycle clubs, people who once called Harley part of the family, are now switching to British Triumphs or Yamaha and BMW bikes from Japan and Germany. The story of a 58-year-old mechanic from Milwaukee. Wisconsin, Harley's hometown, offers a sobering reflection. He spent more than 30 years at the factory, proud of every bolt he ever assembled. But as of this past June, he says he's only being scheduled for 3 shifts a week, not enough to make ends meet. In states like Wisconsin and Missouri, where Harley was once a pillar of local industry, factories are now operating at minimal capacity. Small parts suppliers, businesses almost entirely reliant on Harley contracts, are struggling to stay afloat, cutting staff or shutting down entirely. Of course, there are still thousands of Canadians loyal to Harley, and they may always be, but the numbers, the closed dealerships, and stories like Rick's suggest something bigger is happening. The unraveling of an icon. Amazon was once seen as the ultimate symbol of convenience, speed, and limitless choice for Canadian consumers. Many had come to view the Buy Now button and 2-day shipping as indispensable parts of modern life. But recent shifts may now lead many to ask, is that convenience still worth it? According to recent data, Amazon orders from Canada dropped by as much as 39% in Q2 of 2025, meaning nearly 4 out of every 10 orders vanished within just 3 months. Alongside this, over 110,000 Prime accounts were cancelled during the same period, a clear sign that Canadian consumer loyalty toward Amazon is shaking at its core. Just imagine if each Prime member previously paid $1,649 a month, then the cancellations alone have cost Amazon over $1.8 million per month, or nearly $5.5 million in just 1 quarter, not even counting the lost revenue from cancelled orders. Amazon also hit Canadian consumers hard in the wallet when it announced a price hike for its Prime service, making this wave of cancellations even more understandable. Specifically, the monthly Prime subscription fee has increased from just $2 to $9.99, nearly 5 times higher than before. Meanwhile, the annual plan skyrocketed from $20 to $99 per year, a 395% increase in one adjustment. For a Canadian household, an extra $8 per month for Amazon Prime may not break the bank, but it's enough to force a reconsideration. Is fast delivery and access to a few Amazon originals really worth it anymore? Others argue that this wave of Prime cancellations isn't just about pricing or the shopping experience. It may reflect a growing backlash against major US platforms that have remained silent as trade tensions between the two countries tighten. Canadian consumers appear to be returning to local platforms like Canadian Tire, Simons, Ira and Indigo, names that may not offer lightning-fast shipping, but provide a sense of security and solidarity in uncertain times. Perhaps for many, paying a bit more or waiting a few extra days no longer seems like a big deal if it means supporting homegrown businesses, and the impact isn't just on the buying side. At an Amazon warehouse in Pennsylvania, a 61-year-old supervisor shared that his shifts have been cut in half. According to some employees, this is largely because orders from Canada have all but dried up. Inventory is piling up, trucks sit idle without shipment orders, and many contract workers, those who rely on seasonal jobs, have had their contracts abruptly terminated. From what seemed like a small change, an extra $8 per month, a domino effect is now unfolding, stretching from consumer wallets to logistics operations across the border. And perhaps in the eyes of many Canadians, convenient shopping is no longer the top priority. Netflix, a name once heard every evening in millions of Canadian households, appears to have chosen silence as trade relations between Canada and the United States grew increasingly tense in early 2025. While many American companies issued statements to reassure or made adjustments to show goodwill toward the Canadian market, Netflix, perhaps due to internal strategy or political caution, remained publicly silent. The result, an estimated 520,000 subscription cancellations in a single quarter, a number that some Canadian media outlets have called an unprecedented freefall for the platform in the northern market. 520,000 users represent nearly 1.3% of Canada's population, which currently stands at around 40 million. With an average monthly subscription fee of $16, Netflix is estimated to have lost at least $8.3 million Canadians in monthly revenue, or over $24 million in a quarter from Canada alone. This may be the worst decline Netflix has experienced since entering the country. And what about Canadian households? Here's a simple example. If a family subscribes to the premium plan for a year, they'll spend around 200 CAD, not including tax. With that amount, they could cover part of their electricity bill, enjoy a few meals out as a family, or simply switch to more affordable domestic platforms like Crave or CBC Gem, which offer relevant content at more budget-friendly prices. The impact of this cancellation wave doesn't seem limited to the North. It may be part of a reverse globalization ripple effect, where a shock in an international market can shake the entire ecosystem back at a company's home base. In California, Netflix's content production hub, several small production crews have reportedly halted operations. A freelance screenwriter in Los Angeles shared that her project in collaboration with Netflix was indefinitely postponed just weeks after Canadian market indicators began to plummet. She said she doesn't blame the company, but she, like many others, felt a creeping anxiety as what seemed like a cold wave of budget cuts hit. So, the question remains, are the 520,000 cancelled subscriptions just the tip of the iceberg? And will similar shocks continue to occur if global tech giants continue to underestimate market responses from across the border? Walmart has long been considered a symbol of convenience and affordability, especially thanks to its in-house brands such as Great Value, Equate, and George for many North American consumers. These names were once a familiar choice on store shelves. But in 2025, a quiet wave of change appears to be sweeping across Walmart stores in Canada. Consumers in Alberta, Ontario, and even British Columbia seem to be increasingly turning away from Walmart's private label products originating from the US. Since March 2025, sales of Walmart's in-house American-sourced items have dropped by as much as 29%. Looking at that figure, one can grasp the broad impact of this phenomenon. If a Walmart store in Alberta used to sell around 1,000 units of Great Value or Equate products per week, that number may now have fallen to around 700, a decline of nearly 1 per 3. On a national scale, this drop likely affects not only revenue, but also Walmart's supply chain, particularly American suppliers based in states like Arkansas, Georgia, and North Carolina, which have traditionally played a key role in Walmart's distribution network. There are reports suggesting that Walmart's management in Canada has quietly directed a gradual reduction in US-branded private label products, replacing them with domestically sourced goods from local manufacturers. This seems to be a carefully calculated adjustment strategy, gradually steering consumers toward Canadian-made alternatives. From the perspective of Canadian consumers, this growing preference for local goods appears to be both a display of national pride and a quiet response to ongoing trade tensions with the United States. For many, choosing a made-in-Canada product no longer hinges solely on quality or price. It has come to symbolize economic support for the country and protection of local jobs. This shift, upon closer inspection, may not be limited to the realm of consumer habits. It is beginning to generate a ripple effect back to southern US states places that were once vital links in Walmart's supply chain. States like Arkansas, Georgia, and North Carolina may now be feeling the sting of declining revenue from Walmart Canada, one of their most consistent and significant customers. Disrupted supply networks, reduced factory output, and thousands of workers facing uncertain futures may become the new reality. In the past, a Ford F-150 or Chevrolet Silverado wasn't just a mode of transportation. It was a silent declaration by Canadians of strength, durability, and North American spirit. But things seem to be changing. After Canada imposed a 20% tariff on US imported vehicles in retaliation for American tariffs on aluminum and lumber, the domestic auto market began to shift noticeably. As a result, prices for American vehicles skyrocketed. Specifically, if last year you could drive home a base model Ford F-150 for about $52,000 Canadian, this year the same model might cost between $56,000 and $60,000 depending on the dealership. In just 1 year, the price of the vehicle has jumped by an amount equivalent to the average Canadian monthly salary, currently around $5,000. With a price difference of $4,000 to $8,000, consumers are faced with difficult choices. That money could otherwise cover a full year of car insurance, buy round-trip plane tickets for a family of 4 to Europe, or simply pay for utilities, groceries, and rent for 1 to 2 months. For younger people, middle-class families, and freelancers, groups already struggling amidst rising living costs, this price hike may be enough to push them away from American brands. This could explain why Ford and GM dealerships in Ontario and Alberta reported sales drops of up to 31% in just the second quarter of 2025. Instead, consumers are flocking to Korean and Japanese models like the Hyundai Tucson, Toyota RAV4, and Honda CR-V. These are seen as more affordable, fuel-efficient, and unaffected by the Canadian government's tariffs. In the long term, this shift isn't just about brand preference. It reflects a strategic change in consumer mindset. As Canadians begin to ask themselves, why should I pay more just to support an American brand across the border? States like Michigan and Ohio, once the heart of the US auto industry, are beginning to feel the impact of trade retaliation shaped like a pickup truck. Some factories are now at risk of slowing down production due to a sharp drop in Canadian orders. What happens if inventories pile up? And will skilled workers be forced to lose their jobs? Since the shifts in trade policy between the US and Canada became more apparent in early 2025, there have been growing signs that several US industries, particularly in key manufacturing states, are facing significant disruptions. Michigan and Ohio, long considered the backbone of the American auto industry, are witnessing a decline in orders from northern partners. Some Canadian importers have reduced their purchases of components and auto parts from the US, likely in search of closer or more cost-effective alternatives. This has slowed down supply chains in the region, even halting operations at several small and mid-sized factories in Georgia and Arkansas, where poultry processing and food production are major economic sectors. The story is similar. These states appear to be losing market share in Canadian exports. According to industry sources, several local businesses have paused expansion plans and reduced output to adjust to weaker than expected demand. Wisconsin and Missouri, both notable for their dairy and packaged food industries, have also been swept up in the turbulence. According to local media, some factories in rural Wisconsin have quietly shut down or are running at minimal capacity to cut costs. Even losing just a portion of the Canadian market seems to be enough to trigger a domino effect on small farms and suppliers. In Texas and Pennsylvania, well known for oil, gas, and industrial equipment, the outlook isn't much brighter. Several economic reports suggest that Canada has begun sourcing fuel and equipment from alternative suppliers, leading to a sharp decline in contracts coming from the north. Some businesses in Texas, especially those that previously supplied equipment to large energy infrastructure projects, are reportedly struggling with cash flow challenges. So, what are the consequences? Although not yet heavily covered by major news outlets, the impacts are likely already evident in many local communities. A growing number of small and mid-sized US factories have been forced to scale back production or temporarily shut down. Industrial parks that were once bustling now seem noticeably quieter. This translates into thousands of workers facing reduced hours or job loss, a bitter pill to swallow for those who once believed in the resilience of domestic manufacturing. And it's not just large factories feeling the pressure. Small suppliers are also struggling more than ever. Some have lost contracts after just one season, leading to ripple effects across transport companies, warehouses, and farms that supply raw materials. In the retail space, Walmart, one of the largest supermarket chains operating in Canada, appears to be quietly adjusting its product policies. Some reports suggest that US origin private labels, like Great Value, Equate, and George, are being significantly boycotted by Canadian consumers, with sales dropping by up to 29% in the first half of 2025. While there has been no official statement, the growing shelf space taken up by Canadian-made products likely reflects a strategic shift by Walmart to align with changing customer preferences. In the context of certain moves from Canada that are believed to be affecting cross-border trade flows, what has drawn considerable attention is the response, or rather the lack thereof, from the US federal government. So far, there have been no official statements from Washington to reassure businesses, nor has there been any indication of emergency relief programs, tax breaks, or specific policy adjustments. Some observers suggest that for small and medium-sized enterprises, particularly those in food production, consumer goods, or pharmaceuticals, this silence may evoke a sense of abandonment. In states like Michigan, Iowa, or Wisconsin, home to many factories that used to supply products regularly to the Canadian market, there are signs that some orders are no longer being maintained. Many factory owners have said they've had to proactively adjust business plans due to a lack of guidance from government agencies. Others note that some individuals have taken the initiative to petition their local representatives, proposing temporary relief measures such as tax reductions on raw materials or support for working capital loans. However, responses typically amount to statements like "under review" or "will escalate to higher levels." Meanwhile, shipping and input costs continue to rise. While the export market, which once accounted for up to a quarter of total revenue, is becoming increasingly unstable, it's not just business owners feeling the pinch, workers are also clearly sensing the shift. According to some sources, processing plants in states like South Dakota and Missouri have already cut working hours from 450 hours per week down to just 32. Some longtime employees say that all Canadian orders for the upcoming quarter have been cancelled, forcing them to consider cutting household expenses or seeking part-time work elsewhere. For farmers in the American heartland, who rely heavily on exports of soybeans, wheat, and corn, the outlook is equally grim. Reports indicate that some cooperatives have even planned crop purchases due to the lack of a stable outlet. Meanwhile, the support mechanisms once implemented during the US-China trade war have yet to be reinstated, at least as of now. An atmosphere of uncertainty and waiting seems to be spreading, not like an immediate economic crisis, but more like a lingering fog, quiet, persistent, and with no clear end in sight. Some experts believe the federal government may be choosing to cautiously observe, avoiding bold statements during a politically sensitive period. Perhaps officials are hoping these trade tensions are temporary and will self-correct via market forces. It's also possible that strategic foreign policy calculations are behind Washington's reluctance to issue a public response, however, to many citizens. This silence feels unsettling as major corporations like Amazon, Netflix, and McDonald's report revenue declines in the Canadian market, and domestic factories operate at reduced capacity. People are beginning to wonder, has the government fully grasped the importance of the northern market? While no one can say for certain what lies ahead, it seems clear that a prolonged silence, especially in an era of real-time news, can easily be interpreted in negative ways. And at a time when market confidence desperately needs reinforcement, delays in policy responses may prove more damaging than the crisis itself. In the modern world, where trade borders are increasingly blurred and economies are tightly interdependent, consumers were once considered mere cogs in the vast machinery of the global economy. But recent realities have proven the opposite. Consumers can become a powerful driving force capable of shifting the balance of economic power, even in bilateral relationships once thought to be rock solid, such as the one between Canada and the United States in 2025. Despite the absence of official calls from major organizations, a quiet wave of skipping American goods seems to have spread across supermarkets, restaurants, and retail chains. For many older citizens, those who have witnessed the parallel growth of the two North American economies, this phenomenon may serve as a reminder that emotions and a sense of justice can seep into every purchasing decision. A number of American businesses, particularly in agriculture, energy, and consumer goods, appear to have been caught off guard as demand from the Canadian market suddenly declined. Many experts believe that these companies had become overly dependent on their northern neighbor without developing strong enough alternative channels. Furthermore, having failed to anticipate the response from Canadian consumers, many American firms seemed unprepared to adjust their marketing strategies, pricing, or even their products to meet the emerging, quietly shifting tastes of the market. Amid rising trade tensions and increasingly complex foreign policies, the wave of boycotting American goods in Canada seems to raise a broader question. Is this merely an isolated reaction or an early sign of a trend that could spread globally? Canada, a country once considered a trusted friend in its relationship with the US, now appears to be taking a more cautious stance in bilateral trade relations. In the eyes of many experts, the decline in Canadian consumer purchases of American products may not be purely economic, but instead reflect a growing sentiment of turning away from the US. This has led some analysts to wonder if a long-standing partner like Canada, one that shares deep geographical, historical, and economic ties with the US, is showing signs of consumer disengagement. How might other partners around the world respond? Economies like the European Union, Japan, South Korea, or Australia, which are already facing numerous challenges and disagreements in trade relations with the US, may be closely watching Canadian consumer behavior as a kind of test case. What if they follow suit? Could these nations begin leaving American goods on store shelves? Just as Canada is doing, if the boycott trend spreads, a new global consumer order could emerge. US industries, particularly those heavily reliant on exports such as agriculture, processed foods, everyday consumer goods, or light manufacturing, may face growing soft barriers from international markets. In such a scenario, global consumers are likely to become more sensitive to a product's origin, and purchasing decisions may increasingly align with political or environmental values. Though this remains a speculative forecast, if the trend continues or even intensifies, it could significantly impact America's international economic position in the long term, especially at a time when global supply chains are becoming more fragmented and undergoing structural transformation. From a jar of peanut butter to a pickup truck, from entertainment platforms to supermarket shopping carts, each small purchasing decision now carries a powerful message about trust, identity, and national standing. And while Washington continues to debate policy at the top level on store shelves in Toronto or Vancouver, choices have already been made clearly and decisively. So in the end, is consumption still a private matter, or has it become a quiet form of political action? What about you? Do you believe consumer behavior can truly drive major change? Share your thoughts in the comments below.